I can remember a day specifically when I thought she changed as a coach, where she really grew. It was early in her time here. We were on a double road trip somewhere. I'm not sure where, but we had 2 games in a row that were on the road. So we stayed on the road. We were practicing in someone else's gym. And she was really getting after the ladies in a practice. And you could tell they just weren't responding to it. Their heads were down. And she noticed it. And she stopped. She was very vocal. And she stopped. And she realized this isn't working. So she calmed down. She said, okay. And she just started slowly, calmly explaining whatever it was she wanted them to do that they weren't doing in practice. And I remember thinking, wow, she just changed.
Welcome into South Carolina Sideline, everybody. I'm Matt Dowell, and we have another special guest on our podcast this week. Brad Muller, the voice of the Gamecocks, joining us in our studio. As always, before we begin our interview, make sure you guys like, subscribe, follow, all that fun stuff. Comment on our podcast on YouTube. You can watch it, and you can listen to it wherever you get your podcast. Hope you're enjoying it. We've had a lot of fun doing it. But I'm so excited that Brad's on our show today. Brad, not only are you the voice of the Gamecocks, you do women's basketball, you do softball, you do women's soccer, but you've got a lot of behind the scenes tidbits that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy. So we're going to talk to Brad about his backstory. We're going to preview this South Carolina UCLA softball super regional that Brad thinks is going to be a doozy. So we're excited for it. And then he'll give us some behind the scenes tidbits as well. But Brad, welcome in to South Carolina Sideline.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
We're really, really excited. So first, Brad, let's just go back to the beginning of where it all began, because you've been with South Carolina for a long time. And for those watching, you might not know what Brad looks like, but you've heard him a lot over the years. But Brad, how did it all start? How did your journey in this industry begin?
All right. Well, I was a broadcast journalism student here at the University of South Carolina. Came down from Connecticut in the late 80s. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I thought, all right, my playing career, I knew I wasn't going to play Division I college sports and wanted to go to a big school. So I said, well, maybe I could watch sports for a living. I saw what Brett Musburger was doing back in the 80s. I thought that might be fun. And so I came here, worked in news when I first graduated here at a local radio station, WVOC, back in the day as a board op and news reporter covering stuff. And after I covered a murder trial, I'm like, yeah, I definitely don't want to work in news. When I had to interview, victim parents, and I was like, you know what, this isn't what I wanted to do. Quick aside, when Watch Fox first became a TV station here in Columbia back in the early 90s, right around 92, I think, and it was across the river, the original housing, I worked for about 6 weeks at Watch Fox. Before they even had a news department, because I thought, maybe I can get in and be a sports broadcaster with this new TV station. Well, they hadn't even created the news department yet, and I was working, I guess, on the production side from midnight till 8 a.m. running Master Control. So I was recording shows back when you used to record shows to play later in the day. So I was recording like Montel Williams and all these shows from midnight till 8 a.m. and recording cartoons that were going to run later. So I'd watch Tiny Toon Adventures at like 3 in the morning with me and one other guy. And he would sing the Tiny Toons song like all night long. I'd watch the sunrise come up every day. I did that for 6 weeks. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Midnight to 8 a.m. for a 22-year-old? No. Yeah. So anyway, that was my start in TV, if you want to say.
So you're a Watch Fox OG.
I am. I like boots on the ground when they first built this place when it was at a different location. All right. So did that, and then I ended up finding a job, and I wanted to do play-by-play, and somebody gave me the great advice, well, go somewhere where they'll let you do it. Yeah. And so I found a radio station in Milledgeville, Georgia, which if you throw a dart and hit the center of the state, that's Milledgeville. It was actually the capital of Georgia right around the Civil War, before the Civil War, so a little history there. So I was working at a radio station there, doing broadcasts for 3 local high schools and a Division II school called Georgia College. And a Georgia Military Junior College was there as well, doing their football. So I was doing, football, basketball, baseball for, these high schools and the college and the junior college, just having a great time. Also spinning records in the afternoon at the radio station for really no money. Starving. I lost 15 pounds the first 6 weeks I was there because I couldn't afford to eat, Yeah. But I had a ball. And after 3 years at the radio station, ended up taking a job at the college as the sports information director. Long story short, the SID there had to leave under strange circumstances. And I had actually quit my job at the radio station because I thought I had a job up in North Carolina. So I was training my replacement, and the radio station got sold somehow during the 2 weeks, and they told me, hey, I don't have a job. So now I'm unemployed in Milledgeville. But anyway, got the job at
that sounds like a movie.
Yeah, it does.
In Milledgeville.
Yeah, or a book. So ended up, the SID left. They all knew me as the broadcaster, so I got the job as the SID there, and they allowed me to continue to do the broadcast at Georgia College for baseball and basketball. And I did their media guides and their press releases. This was before social media, so it was a lot easier in terms of you did the old school nuts and bolts. You kept stats. You did media guides and press notes, and websites were a new thing. I remember when we first built it. So anyway, did that. Was down in Milledgeville for 13 years. Had an absolute ball. Lots of great memories. Covering Division II sports there. The teams had a lot of success. I always say I've got my dream job now, but that was the best job I ever had because of the people. Small colleges, it's a much close knit thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was telling you before we went on the air. We'd have the baseball games. The grounds crew was the team, and that included me. So you'd be out there pulling a tarp, or if we had an NCAA tennis match one year, and it was raining, so we're all out there squeegeeing the tennis courts. Anyway, so I moved here basically to get married. My wife is from Columbia, and she had a good job here. Her family was here, and I said, all right, I'll get a job. I got a job here at USC, initially at the Alumni Association, and thought my broadcast career was over. Was a little bit bummed about that, but was happy because my wife was happy because I moved here, and but thought it was over. And a couple months after I left, or after I got here, was at an event for the Alumni Association that we did every year for the baseball and softball team. And I was going through the softball line because I enjoyed college softball. And at that time, Ray Tanner was kind of at his peak, so everyone was going through the baseball line. I'm going to go talk to Joyce Compton, the softball coach, and the players, and get to know them. And I told her what I used to do. And she said, and she'll always tell you, Joyce Compton will tell you that she's responsible for me getting my broadcast gig at South Carolina because while I told her what I used to do, and she said, well, as luck would have it, the guy that was broadcast back then, it was this webcast for softball before the SEC network, was also the women's basketball radio guy at the time. His name was Brad Muller. And so during the crossover, he couldn't do some softball games. And she said, hey, what would it take for you to do our softball games when he's with basketball? And I said, a sandwich? I don't care. I'll do it. Be the voice of a Carolina team. I said, for a few weeks, I'll do it. And so I did that. And as luck would have it, at the end of that season, Brad Muller left. I was having lunch. That was my first bit of luck. And my second bit of luck, I was having lunch with Liz McMillan at Learfield, who runs the radio operations for South Carolina. It was basically trying to sell advertising for the Alumni Association. And Brad Muller, the radio guy for women's basketball, was leaving to take another job. And she'd known my background, and she basically said, hey, would you be interested in doing women's basketball here? I said, yeah. And this is before Coach Staley was here, and there weren't a lot of people coming to our women's basketball games at the time, but I didn't even ask if it paid. I said, I'll do it. And she said, well, don't you want to ask your boss first? And my boss at the Alumni Association was good with it, so long story short, I got the radio gig for women's basketball, and that was 18 years ago. So that was great. I had a ball from day one, and then started working full-time in athletics around 2014. It was shortly after Ray Tanner became the athletics director. I was looking to work full-time in athletics again to couple with my broadcasting, and kind of pitched him on an idea of them having a feature writer in-house that would do just feature stories beyond what the SIDs did on game reports and stuff like that, and work with our video people back in the day. And he liked the idea, and long story short, they created a position. I applied for it and got it, and so I've done that. And right after I got that is when they launched the SEC network, and they said, hey, we need local talent. So I was here, and again, lucked into another thing. They said, you're going to, which do you want to do? I said, I'll do women's soccer. I didn't know volleyball. They gave me the choice. I'm like, I'll do women's soccer. And so did that, and did softball for SEC Network as well, in addition to the radio thing. And I would like to say it was because of hard work and talent, but I was really in the right place at the right time several times since I moved back to Columbia.
So you have lived many different lives and you wear many different hats. And so, yeah, he does play-by-play, he does all the voice, but he also works for the University of South Carolina. So it's interesting. You have a lot of jobs. You have a lot of things you have to do. But for specifically with women's basketball, you have been there really since the beginning, before it became what it is. What has it been like for you to watch it become this powerhouse program?
Well, I just kind of chuckle to myself again because very fortunate to be where I am, that I was just happy to get a D1 broadcasting job, and then, then we got good. Dawn came here and started doing. It was really neat to watch her build this from the ground up. To see the struggles early on, and it didn't. It happened quickly, but there were some bumps, there were some struggles. And it was neat watching her evolve as a coach. Because when she got here, she was used to certain kinds of players that she had when she was at Temple. And when she got here, she was getting, higher caliber players that maybe didn't respond as well to her style of coaching at the time. And in my mind, I don't know if she'll say this, but I can remember a day specifically when I thought she changed as a coach, where she really grew. It was early in her time here. We were on a double road trip somewhere. I'm not sure where, but we had 2 games in a row that were on the road. So we stayed on the road. We were practicing in someone else's gym. And she was really getting after the ladies in a practice. And you could tell they just weren't responding to it. Their heads were down. And she noticed it. And she stopped. She was very vocal. And she stopped. And she realized this isn't working. So she calmed down. She said, okay. And she just started slowly, calmly explaining whatever it was she wanted them to do that they weren't doing in practice. And I remember thinking, wow, she just changed. Like her whole style in that one day at practice. And I think, she grew as a coach, and the players responded to it. And I think, she's evolved a lot as a coach. She always knew the game, but she had to evolve, to her players. And I just always remember that moment. And it felt like things took off from there, where she realized sometimes she had to adjust to them. And I think you've seen that over the years, too, when you had the whole, first you had the Aaliyah Boston crew that was all business-like, and then you had the daycare crew after that, where she had to adjust to them. And even though it was hard, so it's just been so fun to watch her, create this powerhouse program, but to also watch her evolve as a coach. Sometimes doing things that she didn't want to do, but knowing it was going to be better for the team.
And I think what's interesting too about your job and how it's different from mine. So like I get access to the team, but it's kind of like organized access,
right.
Whereas you, since you will work for the school and you fly with the team, to all of their games, you have more access and kind of a more personal relationship with them. So for our listeners and our viewers, what is the access like for not just women's basketball, all your Gamecock teams? How much do you get to watch them, talk to them, all that kind of stuff?
Well, the neat thing is you see them for what they are. Like, to me, as a 55-year-old, they're kids. I know they're technically adults, but they're young people. And so if you only see them on game day, and they're great athletes, obviously, you see them in that mode as these terrific athletes that you just want them to win so badly. But, when I see them, getting onto the plane, carrying their large stuffed animals, and, see them being silly and having problems that 19-year-olds have that I guess I had those problems when I was 19, or just what I thought were problems. I see them more as kids and people that, we forget just because they're big doesn't mean they're fully grown yet, emotionally and all that. So I just see a different side of the student athletes that they're people, like where I'm not angry. After a game, I'm disappointed if things don't go well, but I'm not really angry at them like sometimes fans can get, because I'm like, well, I know that he or she's got something going on beyond basketball or softball or baseball, whatever's going on. There's always things about kids that maybe aren't made public, and so you understand sometimes. Like, I remember there was years back when I used to work football games here. We used to do replay broadcasts for football games for Sports South, and I used to work on those broadcasts. And I remember there was a kid who was a defensive back, punt returner, had a bad day, like fumbled a punt in a game. Maybe he fumbled 2, I don't know. And you could hear it from the press box fans just screaming at this kid, like most fans do. It's part of the game. And I knew that, I think like a few weeks ago or a month ago, that kid had lost a parent, and I'm like, man, that kid's got a lot going on in his life beyond that fumble that just happened.
Yeah.
You know, so to answer your question, the neat thing about being behind the scenes is you get to know the kids and what they're really like beyond, you know, scoring baskets and all that, and that makes it more fun when they do succeed because you know their backstory is a little bit better. And so, you know, that also makes you want to cheer for them a little bit more because you do know, you know, the struggles they've had or the joys they've had, or, you know, a little bit about their families. So that's the best part about them is getting to know what they are beyond being athletes.
So you have such good access, and that is true. I mean, they're humans, and they are, again, like 18 to 21-year-olds. At the end of the day, on a national stage, they have so much pressure on them. It's insane. But I know last week when we had Lulu on, I really wanted our viewers and our listeners to know the difference in the types of media, because I think everyone, like, we're all in the same industry. People might think we all do the same things. Not really the case. You know, Lulu is a print writer, very different from what I do on TV. And what we do, you know, you're on air too, but what you do is very different from what I do, you know, on local news and local sports, because play-by-play is hard, y'all. Let me tell you something. Play-by-play is not easy. It is a skill. You have to be, I don't know, man. I tried to do it in school and I was like, I am not good at this. Like you learn what you're good at, you learn what you're not good at, and I was not good at play-by-play. People always ask me, do you want to do it? And I'm like, like, you know, family and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if it's really my thing. But what is the key to being a great play-by-play announcer? Because it is hard, especially on radio.
Right. I think with radio, the main thing is, one, you got to know your audience. Preparation, of course, is key in that. And that's what I teach a class in sports announcing at USC as well during the fall. But you know, preparation is key. You have to know your audience. And for radio, I tell my students all the time, pretend a blind man is sitting next to you and just tell him what's happening. Over describe if you have to when you start out of what's happening, because on radio, you're painting the picture for them. You know, if you're in your car driving, you know, you need to know what the score is often. You know, in this industry, they say, you know, say the darn score, you know, how much time is on the clock, what inning you're in, stuff like that. You got to repeat that kind of stuff. But, you know, if you stick to the basics, you can be good. You can be really good. And I learned that from my mentor when I was at Georgia College. Is he always told me, he said, just keep it simple. Tell me who's got the ball, where they've got it, where they shot it from, whatever, what they're wearing, what direction they're going. And that's where I started thinking about the blind man. Okay, you know, Gamecocks are moving left to right. You know, wearing their home white uniforms with the garnet numbers trimmed in black. You know, working on the right wing down to the baseline, and just tell them where it is, how much time's on the clock to score. If you keep it simple, it's not as hard as you think. You know, because you don't have to worry about catchphrases and all that. Just tell me what you're seeing. TV's a little bit different because they're not depending on you to really tell you what's happening. You're more of commenting on what's happening because they can see it. You know, they've got the TV bug. They know the score. They know the time. So maybe you're throwing out some stats. You're having a conversation with the person that you're working with to tell stories. So it's a little bit more storytelling, less play-by-play. And there's times when you can just shut up. You know, especially like in a sport like baseball or softball. I know sometimes the most difficult thing for me when I'd be going from radio for basketball to softball for TV, and you know those seasons cross over. I remember when I first started doing the TV games for softball, our producer would get in my ear every once in a while and he'd say, remember, you're not doing radio. So, and he was basically saying, take a couple of pitches off unless they hit it. You know, you don't have to tell me where every pitch is because they just saw it. You know, so that's the hardest part for me when I'm transitioning from radio to TV is remembering, just breathe a little bit.
The vibes, the atmosphere.
Just let the pictures tell the story a little bit.
That's great. And also, do you have a radio voice? Like, do you have a voice? Because my family gives me crap when they watch me on the news, and they're like, "Why you sound like that?" Because I'm like, "Welcome into sports, everybody." You know, it's more. Do you have a radio voice?
I don't think it's anything intentional. I think it's just I'm more focused when I'm doing a game. You know, and. You know, if I'm talking with friends, my language might get a little more colorful and things like that. But when I'm broadcasting a game, it's more I'm just locked in on what I'm seeing and my preparation. So if there's any difference between my voice when you know you and I are talking when the cameras are off or when I'm doing a game, it's not intentional. It's just I'm laser focused on watching the game.
Well, laser focused on the game, and he's going to be laser focused this weekend, as we all are, because South Carolina softball has a big super regional against UCLA. Brad, your story is continuing because it's not over. You have a lot more games you're going to call, and you know South Carolina softball very well. So we're going to take a quick time out here on South Carolina sideline, and we're going to analyze South Carolina versus UCLA because Brad telling me that it's going to be tougher than maybe Gamecock fans think. We'll talk the super regional right after this. Well, Brad, South Carolina softball, who you know very well, and you call all their games during the regular season, they have a tough super regional this weekend against the number 9 seed UCLA. It was that fun battle between who was going to get the 8 seed, South Carolina or UCLA. The Gamecocks got it, so they are at home this weekend, which is huge, especially when hosting a West Coast team. But because they're on the West Coast, a lot of people might not know a lot about this UCLA team, and you've been telling me that they are very good, and this is going to be tough this weekend.
Yeah, you get so locked in on the SEC because obviously the SEC in terms of top to bottom was the best league in the country this year with all the teams that got in. And, obviously South Carolina was tested every week because you were playing a nationally ranked team 3 games every weekend. But yeah, UCLA, if you're not familiar with softball, college softball, they are one of the traditional softball powers anyway. If you want to compare them historically, they're like maybe the Tennessee or the UConn in terms of they've won the World Series 12 times. I think they've been there like 32 times since it became an NCAA sport back in 1982. So they're the ones that are always there. They've been the last couple of years. They've won 52 games this year. They're 52-10. I believe 28 of their wins are run rule victories. Okay, so they're smoking people.
So they're good. Yeah, is what you're telling us.
Yeah, team batting average near 350, which is ridiculous. They've got 2 players that have hit more than 20 home runs. They've got one that's hit 25, one that's hit 22, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're batting over 350, and they draw a lot of walks. And to tie that, to add to that, their pitching staff, the ERA is under 2.5. They've got 2 pitchers who are putting up ridiculous numbers, traditional strikeout pitchers that have like a 4-to-1 or a 5-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. So the moral of the story is it's hard to put balls in play against them because they get a lot of strikeouts. They are not going to walk you, so you have to go up there, ready to swing. And it's not just one pitcher. They have 2 or 3 that are actually pretty good. I think 2 of them were first team all conference. So they're really good. They can hit. They hit a lot of home runs. They get a lot of walks, and their pitching does not allow a lot of base runners. So this is a really good team. It's going to be a great test. Probably as good a team as South Carolina has seen all year long. And South Carolina obviously has defied the odds all season long. They're playing at home. I'm not putting anything past what Coach Ashley Chastain-Wood and her crew has done, but just be aware of how dominant this team has been from UCLA. I want to say in their 3 wins in the regional, they outscored their opponent something like 35-2.
Yeah.
So they're good.
They are good. So for South Carolina, obviously they've had a fantastic season as well. Sports are all about matchups as well. So in this matchup, what is South Carolina going to have to do if they want to make it to the College World Series?
Yeah, the main thing, obviously, the pitching has to be good, and you have to do what you've done all year, and that's not give up a lot of walks. Now, South Carolina's pitching staff is not a pitching staff that's a dominant strikeout staff. That's not a staff where you're going to get 10 strikeouts a game. It's just folks that get outs. Sam Grass has been terrific this year, whether as a starter or as a reliever. She's kind of the leader of that pitching staff for South Carolina. But she's going to have to be on top of her game. If the rise ball flattens out a little bit, it might leave the yard. So, and you have to limit the walks. If they're going to leave, chances are UCLA's going to hit a home run or 2, especially with those 2 big guns they've had. But hopefully you're facing them with nobody on base, so they can't kill you. Hopefully if they're hitting a home run, it's a solo job, or if the opportunity presents itself, you're walking them to get to the next one. So, the key is keep the other runners off the bases. And for South Carolina, the top of the order needs to come through again. Now, bottom of the order did a great job in the regional. Brooke Blankenship was really hot, who hits in the bottom half of the lineup. Hopefully, the bottom half of the lineup can do what they're doing. But you need the folks at the top to get it done. Quincy Lelio, who's been the leadoff hitter for the Gamecocks all season long, has been tremendous. She was a great addition, a transfer from Oklahoma, and just a terrific kid. And she's had a little bit of a slump, if you will, late in the season. I think she was 1 for 9 in the 3 games at the regional, and I think was hitting hitting under 200 the last 10 games of the year. So I'm hoping that means she's due because she's been fantastic all year. She's the table setter. You get her on base, and with the players they have behind her, with Carly Shelton, who is among the league leaders in doubles, and Ariana Rhodey, who broke South Carolina's home run record this year, you get those table setters on base, you've got a chance with what's coming up behind them.
And I think the mental aspect of the playoffs for any sport is always fascinating. And for South Carolina, I think it's very important for them to say, we're not satisfied. I think it could be very easy to be like, wow, we did it. We're in the super regionals. How great is this? But they've made it very clear throughout this process that they're not wanting their season to end this weekend.
No. And again, this is a team that, it's got great chemistry. And, they were probably the only ones that knew and believed at the beginning of the season they could get where they are. Because I think, all of us were like, well, it's a new coach. It's a whole lot of
expectations.
Yeah, 9 transfers. You're picked dead last in the SEC, which is the toughest. So at that point, you're hoping maybe they can do enough just to sneak into a regional, even with on the road or something like that, even with a losing record. Maybe they could steal a game every weekend. Well, shoot, no, they finished with a winning record in conference, won over 40 games during the year. So, again, this team, you can't count them out because they've continued to defy the odds or defy expectations because they have a belief that they can do it. And who am I to tell them they can't? If you just looked at numbers on paper, you'd go, oh yeah, UCLA looks a lot better offensively and defensively. But you know what? South Carolina's found a way to win in the toughest league in the country.
And they had a dominant weekend as well. So it was good, too, I think, that they didn't struggle through their regional. They got through it swiftly, took care of business, and it's looking good. And it's going to be fun. I hope it's a really good super regional series because college softball is another sport that is just quickly growing and quickly rising. South Carolina and UCLA getting underway on Friday. Friday's at 1 o'clock. Saturday is at 1 o'clock as well. It's a best-of-3 series. So if one of those two teams wins both those games, it's over, and the winner goes to the College World Series. If they split Game 1 and Game 2, they'll play a Game 3 on Sunday, and that time is still to be determined. That's all about TVE and all that fun stuff, so we will see, and hoping for a good one between the Gamecocks and the Bruins. Taking another time out here on South Carolina sideline, but Brad has, he's seen a lot through all Gamecock sports in his time, and he's going to relive some of his favorite memories for us with the Gamecocks when South Carolina sideline returns. Well, Brad, you have seen a lot of highs and lows through all these Gamecock teams. You get to be more behind the scenes than, someone like me in the media gets to. So you've been able to see a lot unfold over the years. Do you have favorite memories with Gamecock women's basketball, maybe with other sports that you've seen throughout your time with South Carolina?
Yeah, there's a lot because, as we talked about earlier, when you get to know the kids, the players, you enjoy that behind-the-scenes stuff maybe more than some of the games themselves. But in terms of the games, obviously the national championships with women's basketball are the highlight of anyone's career, especially in my position, because one, you never know you're going to get there if you're going to get there, because you can do this your entire life and never get there. I've been fortunate. We've been to 4 national championships, won 3 of them. They're all special. The first one, because it was the first one, was special, and you just didn't know if it was ever going to happen or happen again. The second one was great because of it was Aaliyah Boston, and how can you not love that lady? It was just terrific, and that whole crew, that group. And then when they won it a couple of years ago, because it was so unexpected, because you had graduated all 5 starters and you had these other kids come in, and then you go in and you go undefeated. What? So those obviously will always stick out. I think with softball, I believe it was 2018, the last time the Gamecocks hosted a regional prior to this year. They were coming out of the losers bracket and ended up winning, and they beat, I'm trying to think, I think it was Hofstra. It was either Hofstra or Liberty. I know both of them were in the tournament. It was a walk-off home run by Kristen White, first baseman, to win it. And it was amazing because it was a walk-off, but because of her story. Her father had passed away, I think, right before the season started, and we'd actually done a story on Gamecocks Online with her, and she was great. And her dad was, her best friend. And she hit that, and when she hit it, it still chokes me up to think about it. I can remember as soon as she hit it, like I was feeling emotional. My broadcast partner, who's a former Carolina pitcher, Dr. Megan Matthews Bunning, I could tell she was tearing up. And producer got in my ear and said, just lay out, because they were going to let the pictures, tell the thing. And I just pushed the button back and said, I can't talk anyway, because it was so emotional. And if her, of all people, hitting that walk off, and flash to her mom and her family in the stands, and then the tears from the opposing pitcher, and then the tears of joy when she crosses the plate. And it was like probably 30 seconds or so of me not talking. It felt like more, but like I couldn't talk, and then finally started talking again. But that's one of my favorite non-championship moments, just because of who did it.
Yeah, I can tell that it's still like here.
Oh yeah, I mean I show it sometimes in my class that I teach, just different clips and stuff, and like every time I watch it, it gets me. Like and it probably always will.
I love stories like that and moments like that. Those are moments that like you can't plan, that aren't scripted. It's just like one of those like, wow, how did that just happen? Another behind the scenes story that I actually just thought of, and if you want to talk about it, you can, because we share something where we are two of the few that got to go to Paris with the South Carolina women's basketball team, and that's always like a highlight, not just my career, but like my life. And so Brad was one of the few that got to be part of that whole experience. And I don't know how I thought of this, but it just hit my mind. And if you don't want to share this, you can, but do you remember? It was an interesting day because it was another country. This game, was so historic, but like you had technical difficulty. Yeah. Did you remember that? Yeah. And it was like the game was close to starting.
Yeah, people don't know. We almost didn't make it on the air because, you go to, our radio broadcasts are usually done basically through an Ethernet line is how my equipment is plugged into, and that's how it gets broadcast to the radio and online and things like that. And so, of course, we had ordered an Ethernet line for me to we're there all week and nothing is set up. There's no lines, anything. And, we're there for shoot around in the morning, still nothing set up. I get there, 2 hours before game, they're working on it. And I'm going, oh, boy.
Yeah, like, what does that mean?
Because in my pregame show, it's 30 minutes before. And I'm thinking, oh, boy. And they're still working on it. It's 45 minutes before game time, 15 minutes before airtime. They're still trying. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get on the air. And so they get me a line finally. I mean, literally a couple minutes before we go on, and it won't go through to the radio station back, in the U.S. And I'm on the phone with our folks from Learfield. The main office is in Winston-Salem. Fortunately, Phil Brame, who's the general manager, is a lot smarter than me, and so he figured out a way. Basically, it was kind of like daisy chaining it, if you will, but we ran it through a place in Winston-Salem and then ran it back through the station in Columbia to get me on the air literally like 2 minutes before we go on the air. And I was just so thankful that he knew enough about the technology. Because for those that don't know, like for women's basketball, I broadcast by myself. I'm my engineer.
And we're in Europe. Right, we're in another country.
And I don't speak French anyway. So I'm trying to talk to this guy like, it's not working. No working pa. I mean, it's that.
And it was like all of us, because I mean, everyone was just kind of in the same boat. We're doing this for the first time in Paris. It's a historic game. Everyone's just going like this way, trying to figure out their own business. So and Brad's just like running around like, help.
So we got on the air, and I'm just thankful. We got the game. It was a great game. South Carolina wins, and then as soon as the game is over, I've got a short post game show. Just we have to get ads in and do our thing, and the technician comes up and he's getting ready to pull my cord. And I'm like, no, I'm in my first commercial break, and I'm like, no, I still need that. It's like, no, we need the internet for the press conference in the back room. I'm like, you don't have enough internet for, and I'm like, you got to give me 5 minutes. He's like, no. I'm like, yes, you're giving me 5 minutes because I got to get 2 more commercial breaks in.
You're like, we got this far.
Yeah.
Paris was a learning lesson for all of us. Yes. I think for everyone involved, because it was, the first time all of us were doing that. Yeah. And so we all have a story. It was great. It was a lot of fun. We had a fantastic time. But it was a learning curve.
Yeah, and I know it's a cliche, but the food was fantastic.
It really was.
And my wife still teases me how I say croissant with a French accent instead of South Carolina croissant, because the breakfast food there was
so good.
Yeah, I became a food snob.
It was the trip of a lifetime. But anyway, technical things happen all the time. But when you're in Paris, everything feels amplified by like 10 because you're like, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. And so
it wasn't actually my worst equipment malfunction when I was at Georgia College. Our baseball team in 1995 was playing in the national championship game of the World Series. And this is back when you do radio broadcast through phone lines. And we had this old mixer, and we're literally minutes before time, and our mixer wouldn't work. And so my broadcast partner, who thank God was smarter than I am, he takes it apart. He had a portable soldering kit. Okay, where it's like where you melt little pieces of metal. He figured out something had blown. He takes apart the mixer, and he's literally like sparks are flying, and he's soldering our mixer to make it work. And then literally a minute before airtime, we're on the air, we can do the national championship game. So he was my muse, if you will.
So I just want everyone to, the moral of the story is that sometimes it looks great, it sounds great, but behind the scenes, we're sweating bullets.
Yeah, hair's on fire. Yeah.
And those weren't the first, and it won't be the last.
And especially when you're by yourself. Again,
Yeah.
I'm a one-man crew for women's basketball, and it's like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Get on the phone, and I've done games on my cell
Yeah.
phone before when we've been on island trips in the Bahamas, and the equipment won't work there for whatever reason. So I've racked up some bills on my cell phone. Yeah,
You gotta love it. We
Yeah.
all have stories, and again, it won't be the last time that happens to you, Brad. I hate to tell you.
Yeah,
that.
no,
And,
it won't, no.
Well, we're gonna take one more break here on South Carolina Sideline and wrap things up with Brad Muller. Well, Brad, this has been a great conversation. A lot of laughs, a lot of hopefully interesting behind-the-scenes tidbits for everybody. And I learned some things about Brad that I didn't know today, so it's been a lot of fun. But Brad, where can people find you? Where can they follow you, listen to you? And what's next for you this summer?
Well, this summer, I won't be watching kids play ball other than my son playing Legion ball. But, 'cause my day job of writing stories for the athletics website, I work in the athletics department at USC, so I'm in the Rice Athletics Center. So if people, decide they want to come that way, they can see me walking around. But, what's next? I'll get ready for soccer season in the fall. Will be the next broadcast for me anyway with Coach Shelley Smith and her team. So looking forward to that, and just looking forward to having some weekends off, I guess, for the summer when the sports die down.
The vacation time. Now is the time for us in media to take our vacations. Well, Brad, we thank you so much for coming on South Carolina Sideline. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, a lot of good tidbits from you. We really, really thank you for coming on, and we're looking forward to the softball super regional this weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and hopefully the Gamecocks can find a way to get to.
I know. Brad Muller, the voice of the Gamecocks, a legend, and we are very, very grateful he came on our podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Again, remember to like, subscribe, follow, comment, all that fun stuff we love to do on social media. We'll be back with a new episode next Tuesday right here on South Carolina Sideline.